Again, thank you to Matt and all of you with Michigan high school coaches for the invitation. I'll keep this within the hour, hopefully, so that we can have a chat at the end if we need to. At any time, please use the chat feature. And if Matt's about his business, he'll be able to interrupt me or save them to the end. Very happy to answer questions at any time. Just a little bit of my street credibility for you guys. My sister-in-law was a high school All-American from Michigan in soccer and went on to play at Wisconsin and coach Wisconsin, Michigan, Northern Illinois, and is now a junior college coach, but she was a high school All-American player. And then the Badger team that Matt alluded to, three of the strongest players, the top three recruits who were all seniors the year that we won the national championship, were Livonia Stevenson and Livonia Churchill products. So Michigan high school soccer has been very, very good to me personally over the years. What I've got tonight is just a 14-slide PowerPoint with activities on it. And I will then bring those activities to life verbally. So you will have this PowerPoint. You also will receive, Matt has them, 2 lesson plans that relate to these sessions with the notes on them and the diagrams. And then additionally, both of these sessions I conducted at our convention. So there are 2 YouTube links that you can take with you after the presentation. Each is about 50 minutes long, and you can see all 12 of the activities I'm going to show you coming to life with me coaching them with some Chicago Fire Academy players and then some very good players from Pennsylvania. And the reason I did that is because sometimes the video is problematic. So tonight is just looking at stills, and then, but you'll get the video, or you have the video to watch if you want to watch it on YouTube. So hopefully that will make sense. Rondos, I have to admit that circa 2018, even though I'm the director of coaching education for a national body and I've been in the game a lot, I really didn't know what they were. And everybody kept talking about them, and I got very embarrassed at times, but it was one of those things where you feel like everybody in the room knows and you don't, but you've got to kind of go along with it. And there was a lot of contention about whether you should never do rondos because somehow they're evil, or you should always do them because they're the answer and solution to all great soccer. And I wanted to kind of dispel that myth because, in my opinion, as soccer coaches, we should always, we should try to do our best to avoid the words always or never, unless it comes to child safety. So sometimes you do a progressive training session, sometimes you do something that's unopposed, sometimes you use conditions. I believe that all of those methodologies and nuances can be employed in the game, because I don't think the game is a static kind of product. So I wanted to basically say to people, rondos are great, they have a place, use them if you want to, use them if not. And my definition of a rondo is essentially some sort of keep away activity, some sort of possession keep away activity. The image here, I believe it's Barcelona. So if it's good enough for Barcelona, it's probably good enough for us. And you see them everywhere, and there are various forms of them. So I'm going to show you 6 different rondos, not 6 that you would do consecutively in a session, because that would be very rondo heavy, but maybe you could employ or deploy at different times in your training session. That's what I'm going to try to do. So the first one, everybody's going to be like, if I've got to sit through an hour of this, I'm going to be underwhelmed, but just stay with me for it. So first of all, this type of rondo, all the kids around in a circle, 1 or 2 in the middle, you see it everywhere in elite soccer around the world. Typically, the players pick it up by themselves. They talk a little bit of smack, they laugh, they joke, they have some fun with it. People get frustrated. So I think it has some team building energy. And very often it's actually managed and coached by the coach as well. So in this particular case, I've got 2 defenders in the middle. The cones represent, they could be hanging onto a penny. So it's just the way you know they're the 2 defenders. And then, of course, if they intercept it or win it or whatever the protocol to get in and out is, they drop the cone, they go to the outside, and the kid that lost it picks up the cone and becomes 2 in the middle. So we've all done that. I like to use the center circle if it's available. Very often you don't even have markings, so you don't use them. But understand that if you have the kids on the outside of the circle, and therefore the 2 defenders can't win the ball, they can't pressure you because you're on the outside. So sometimes it's interesting to have the players positioned outside of an area with the defenders on the inside, and it changes the way the defenders defend, and it gives your possession players a bit more breathing room. But if you simply said in this picture, all of the blue on the outside must step into the grid, you immediately change the dynamic aggressively. What are the possession team trying to do? Keep possession. We like the split pass if we can execute it, because it turns the defenders around and causes the biggest hurt to the defenders. We could talk to the defenders about pressing and covering and denying the split pass. So if the ball goes from this player to this player to this player and back and forth, you've got to say that the 2 defenders are winning, even though they haven't dispossessed the ball, because they're keeping the play in front of them. So there are defensive implications to the activity, and there are certainly possession and positive attacking principles. Now, how do we make it a little bit richer? I really like this condition down here, 2 touch, 1 touch. So the team in possession has 2 touches, because sometimes if this kid all the way over here, if she receives the ball, there's no need to play the ball off 1 touch. So a 1 touch condition is not logical very often. So the idea now is it's 2 touch until the defenders apply enough pressure that the player on the ball has to go 1 touch, and now they have to stay 1 touch for the rest of that possession. So the 2 touch to 1 touch, I think, is a really cute little idea. Another idea I like is if the ball is traveling across to this player, there's a game condition where the player to her immediate right and immediate left have to move and switch positions. So as the ball is traveling, this girl is ready to receive it. The 2 players to her immediate left and right switch positions, and 2 new players come in. So you just get a little bit of movement off the ball. And then the other addition I like to make is I like to maybe take my special player, my number 10, my striker, or my creative player, maybe this kid, and put them in the middle as a possession player. And so now on the outside, we try to link with the interior player who's also defended and link out. So sometimes you can actually put some players in the middle. So that is rondo number 1. Very fundamental. As I say, nothing that you guys haven't seen before. It's just some of the little nuances and magic sauce that you put in that brings it to life. And I think as a starting activity in a training session, it's quite a nice one. So here we take that same idea, but we make it kind of a game and competition. So let's say we're going to work with 5 versus 1. Obviously, you can manipulate the numbers to 5 versus 2, 4 versus 2, whatever you want to do. But the way the game works is if this defender here in white has got out, they've won the ball, or they've met the condition to get out, they now sprint across and tag one of their teammates to go in and defend. So you're not on the defending side of the equation for very long, and you're heavily incentivized to win the ball as the defender or defenders, because now you get out and you sprint across and you join your teammates, and then you kind of stick one of your teammates with the job of having to run across. So now we have some competitive elements. How quickly can we win the ball so all 5 of our guys have had 1 go at defending? If you're kind of into conditioning, instead of having them sprint around the field, here's a great way to have this little burst of energy across the park, a little bit of interaction, communication, and tagging off, and we go from there. We can limit the touches in the same way we did with the bigger rondo. We can, again, thicken up the number of defenders. We can start talking aggressively about our principles of play. So we can start talking about the player in possession is looking to penetrate, the player to the left and right are offering support, and the players further away are looking to be mobile and give length and possibly width. So you've got your principles of play in there. There's another interesting little piece here that I just want to throw out, and I haven't diagrammed it very well, so forgive me. But sometimes as coaches, we say, well, we did this activity for 5 minutes, so they got a lot of work in 5 minutes. Consider if this coach here, this one standing with his arms folded, doesn't play that ball in, so the kids are chasing the ball. This 5v1 will be very low in dynamic. But if this coach here at the bottom has a lot of soccer balls and every time one goes out, he plays another one in, this will be 5 minutes of continual action. So sometimes we look at the activities and we say, well, we've done them all for 5 minutes. But depending on the number of balls you've got, the way you supply them, you might be getting exponentially more work in one game than the other. So when you're managing work to rest ratio, consider the surface and consider the frequency that the ball is in play, because you come up with very, very different type of results. So here's a couple of rondo type activities as we progress through. I consider this one more sophisticated than the previous two. And in the left-hand grid, we've got the traditional 4v2 in a rectangle. And in the right-hand grid, we've got a triangle with 3 on the outside and 1 in the middle. And the condition of the game on the right, the triangle, is the ball must always go through cones, because otherwise, of course, the white defender could never win it. So you've got a couple of different variations of keep away with pressure. Even though we're in 4v, if we play 4v1 here on the left, you can pretty much be assured that the kids will stay in the corners. But as we start to play with 2 and we can get good pressure out of the 2, the game condition here is that every time the ball is located with a player, he or she must get immediate support from their left and right, and then they must have the player for what I call the downtown option or the split. So every time the ball moves, the players have a different role and responsibility. So now I'm really teaching my principles of play. 1 player is looking to penetrate, 2 players are looking to support to the left and right, and 1 is looking to provide length. If we can't play the devastating split pass, there's nothing wrong with going to the left and right because we retain possession. And so here we are in a 4v2, and there's a lot of meat on the bone that you can get into that session. One of the big things with rondos is, what do the 2 do if they win it? Do they just kick it out of bounds? Do they try to connect a pass? So you want to have an objective and a counter-attacking mechanism for the 2. And I'll show you that in a second. Over here, what I like about the triangle is that the angles to the ball are a little bit more at a sophisticated level, so that basically the kids physically are always sort of forced to be aware of the angle. And it actually applies up here on the left too. So the triangle one is quite good. And of course, just on the left, you can step the 4 whites outside the grid. And then the same token on the triangles, you could step the 3 players in the triangle. So you don't have to do the in exclusively, the out exclusively. But there's a couple of different rondo opportunities there that I really like. And now we'll start getting just a little bit more sophisticated in these last 3. So this one is a great one, I think, for elements of transition. So if transition is something that you want to coach, speed of reaction when your players win the ball or lose the ball, I think this is a great opportunity. So what I've got is the 5 reds of my possession team. And you can see here, I've put this kid in the middle. So I'm suggesting now we start to get more in the shape of a 5 on a dice. So I've got this kind of number 10 player. Of course, he or she could check out, which would be great, and another player could check in. So this is a free movement for the 5, but I've just pictured you there, them trying to be well spread out. And then they have objectives like a split pass, or a number of passes completed, or a number of times they can play into the number 10 player, the special player, and bump out. For the 3, if they win it, they counterattack into the 4 pug goals on the side. So there's a really nice incentive now, an objective for the 3. If they can win it, they get to score on any of the 4 goals. You can do a couple of things here. If they get tired, they can tag out with their teammates. If you think that it's too challenging for the Reds, you can take a blue out. If you think it's too challenging for the Blues, you could insert a blue. So you've got this 2-team concept. And then after the red team gets 5 consecutive passes or whatever the objective is, they get a point, and you play to 3 points, and then they win the game, and then you just switch the Blues in for the Reds, and you play the same activity. So there's a nice little flow of this, right? But what I think is really critical here is if the Reds, which they shouldn't too much, hopefully, if you've got the balance right, but if they should lose it, it's not enough now to just say, oh, it's okay, the Blues have won it, and we'll just change over. They've got to now defend the goals. And if the Blues win it, they don't just kick it out of bounds, they get to score if they can. So you've really started to incentivize the defenders with a meaningful objective from them, a counter objective, but you're also getting the opportunity now to remind players you had it, now defend, you were defending, you've won it, now let's counterattack the goal. And if you want to keep the energy and the intensity really high, then you have your coach, the goalkeeper, or an injured player keeping a ball in play all the time. And if you want to have it a little bit mellow, you're in kind of a recovery mindset, or you want more considered action that you want to coach, then you feed the ball in a little bit less. But your ability as the coach to manipulate the balls coming in allows you to have like high intensity, medium intensity, low intensity, and how much you want to insert coaching information into it. So I really like that activity. I think that's a good one. And here is the 5th and penultimate rondo. And for those of you that are somewhat students of the game, if you go to YouTube and you look up Bayern Munich, Pep Guardiola, and you find the images of Bayern Munich, the best team in Germany, doing this, you'll see it done at a level that most of us aren't going to probably get out of our high school teams. But you can see on the bottom there's a little bit of information about how it works. On the lesson plan I've provided you, there's a more information on some of these activities. But basically, you take your two of your longer on the team players. So let's say the boy down here on the bottom is your center back. And this player up top here is maybe your number 9. And then the player in the middle is one of your central midfielders. So with a high degree of intentionality, you have players that play in the center and the length of the team at either end of the grid. And then you, with great intentionality, have one of your creative central players in the middle. The 4 blue players represent more of your flank type players. So maybe your right back, right winger, left winger, maybe a couple of your other players. And that's the same for the white team. And the activity is the 3 reds in this picture and the 4 blues just keeping possession and trying to go up and down the grid if they can. The 4 whites are looking to dispossess, and they're moving on the inside of the grid. If and when the whites can steal it, if the whites were to steal it, they just complete a pass to a red, the blues come in, and the whites go out. So the 3 reds are all-time offense, or all-time in possession. And once you get it going, the 4 in the middle defending know that if they win it, they get a free pass out, and then you get the transition of players. It goes quite well. But here's what you're looking to do. You're really looking for the players to understand breaking lines. So for example, this first pass breaks a line of pressure of these 2 guys. So I could pass there, it's safe, but I haven't advanced beyond my opponent. So if I can play through there, I've played 2 whites out. This player's well defended, but he's got depth and width, so he can relocate the pass. And then this player can break the final line by the long pass to the end. Of course, the players on the outside can play across to each other. You can debate whether you want to be allowed to pass left and right, if you could do that. But the idea is that the ball needs to go through the grid, and you're using these advanced angles that are provided by the blues to try to work back and forth. Of course, if we go from this end into the target, we could go back. We could do that. So that's like dropping the pass in a game, dropping it back to a center back and starting again. And if we do that, maybe we get movement from our blues. But this activity, once you get it going, and look it up online if you want to see some, there are some American college examples, but the Bayern Munich one is really good. This is a fantastic training activity as a rondo, possession, defending, communication, all the things you like to work on that are somewhat of a generic nature. But if you start getting into the idea of angles of support, communication, breaking lines of opposing pressure, this is the activity for you. This is a really good activity. And then the sixth rondo, and we're at about the halfway point of the presentation. What I've got here is I've put the rondo essentially in the center circle. And in the case of this rondo, I'm working with my red. So I've put the reds with the numerical advantage. Looks like I've got 4 around the outside of the circle, 2 in it. So I've got 6 against 3 whites. And the game condition is that the coach will give it to the reds. They've got to play into the center circle. And then when they can, they break out and go towards the goal at the top of the screen. So there is a much more bigger number rondo here. And obviously you're using your central midfielders and your opposing central midfielders. And then you're saying, once you can get it out, get it into your targets, and then maybe this one red and maybe another one can go and you can play a 3v2 or a 4v2 for goal. So you're not really worried about goal scoring and all of what happens up in the goal box. What you're really working out is, how do I get the ball out of the center and into my strikers? Is it a pass? Is it a case of a dribble from the bottom here? So now this player dribbles out. How do we break the rondo in the center of the field that goes into the attack? And of course, everything resets and we play out of the circle. In this image, I've said that if the whites win it, they've got a target player here, a target player here, and a target player here. And all that's their objective if they win it. You can see by the numbers, I could easily switch this. If I have 2 goalies, there's no reason why I couldn't allow the white team, if they can win it, to attack the bottom goal too. So you can kind of get an idea of here, this could be, if you've only got 1 keeper, maybe half a field, you let one team be in possession, the attacking team, and then you flip them. But I've got counters. The white players on the cones represent counters. And then this is kind of interesting here. If you play a formation that has 2 strikers, this is very logical, right? So when they get out, these 2 guys have to work out how to combine together, because that's what you do. If you play with 1 central striker and maybe 2 wide strikers, maybe you put a wide red out here, a wide red out here, and only 1 in the middle. And sometimes you can mess about with it. So you could have a 2v2 here, and maybe at this goal box, just a 1v1, because that's, you want to practice twin strikers here, and you want to practice single strikers on the bottom. So a tremendous amount of versatility for you to look through. So there are 6 rondos. I think they definitely progress in complexity. I think each of them has a value. Again, wouldn't do them all in the same training session. And by virtue of their complexity, I would say that this one would be the last thing I do before maybe my final even number scrimmage. Whereas the very first rondo I showed you, I think, is an excellent mental and physical activation rondo. And if you want to put a bit more sophistication in it, there is lots of opportunities there by putting the central player in the middle, or 2-touch, 1-touch, and things like that. So those are rondos. Again, you'll get this PowerPoint presentation with these big slides, and then you'll get a handout which explains them a bit more. And there is a really nice 50-minute video of me working this session with the Chicago Fire players, and you can see each one of these sessions coming to life. So hopefully you'll look at the video and not my voice will get old. So that is the 6 rondos. I'm going to go to this one next. It's a similar in length and setup. Okay, so I'm going to try to shoot for about 20 minutes, and then we've got some time at the end, or you got time for a bio break, or I don't know what your evenings involve. And I know it's later for you because I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, by the way. So I have the advantage of an hour more than you guys. So not bonus material, but just to give you a little bit more thickness, and exactly the same. So this was a presentation of the 2020 convention. There's a video that accompanies it. Matt has it for you, and a lesson plan. Some, unfortunately, no female images on this. I got this from Google, but some pretty good goal scorers there. I think I know all but 3 of them, especially this group down in the lower right, but that's another issue. So 6 attacking finishing activities, the same principle that I think they progress in sophistication. I wouldn't do all 6 in a training session, but maybe there's 1 or 2 here you like. So this one, I quite like this one. I find it to be a really good warm-up activity. And if you've got an older high school team, a mature high school team, and you're not really, you feel like you can get to bigger numbers quickly, this could be a really good warm-up activity. If you feel like you need to be much smaller numbers, for sure. But this game is really quite straightforward. So you've got 2 goalkeepers, and you've got even numbers. Occasionally, you might use an all-time offensive player, but let's just say you got even numbers. And the game is quite straightforward. The goalkeepers are playing with the white team, and they're just possessing. So it's a giant rondo for the white team and the goalkeepers. The red team is looking to win the ball and press the defending team. And if they do, they can score on either goal. They can counter to either goal. So you've got an opportunity now for your 6 reds. They're encouraged to high press. They're numerically disadvantaged, which is what your attacking players typically are in a game. But they're encouraged to high press because if they can win the ball, they're very close to either one of the goals they want to attack. And then you see, in this case, the white player's he's got it from the goalkeeper. He's had his pass intercepted. The red player that's intercepted it has quickly played it across for a one-time finish. So it's a really nice activity because you've got possession. You've got your goalkeepers using their feet a lot in this activity because they're part of the possession team. And in the elite modern game, your goalies are using their feet 80% of the time. And I spoke to a college coach, Division I college coach from New York the other day, and he said his top goalkeeper is out, and now they're not as effective a team because his other goalkeeper can't play with his feet. So the goalkeeper playing with their feet. So you're doing your goalkeepers a huge service with an activity like this. And then there's the opportunity for somewhat eclectic, very fast finishing because you've got the space. This space is what, maybe 50 yards if I look at my 18-yard box. So you can see what you can do with this. So I like that rondo, pretty straightforward. And of course, you give them 5 minutes each in possession. You flip teams, you keep scores. You've got all kinds of different things to do this. You see up here, I like to play like 3-minute sets. I like to play short little sets for points, and then a quick break, and then another short set. So it's not it doesn't drag. It doesn't just go on indefinitely for 15 minutes. I'd rather do 4 3-minute sets with 30 seconds in between, reshape and that kind of thing. So there's one rondo. Sorry. Yeah.
Does the blue line represent anything?
Oh, yes. Great question. So it does. In this particular graphic package I'm using, this field is the 7v7 field. Okay. Which is, so in US youth soccer, the kids, they have to play 7 aside when they're 9 and 10, right? So this field is a graphic example of one of those. So the blue line just serves to give you that nice halfway line. But basically, I'm suggesting to you, if this is 18 yards, and that looks to be maybe a little bit shorter, so that's probably about 20. So I'm suggesting this is about 50 yards, and that's about the halfway line of a 7v7 field. But that's what the blue is. What I will say, though, Matt, if it helps your audience, is use the natural markings of the field to the best of your ability. And I'll show you a couple of examples of this later. So, for example, if I wanted to, if I didn't have these blue lines, I might push the goal back on the halfway line and push the goal in the goal box forward and use the real halfway line as a distinguishing halfway marking, because I do think it's good to use the markings of the field. And very much to that point, now this blue line, which you can establish, maybe it's on a 7v7 field if you're training with it, whatever you do to get it, represents a halfway line. And the game is quite straightforward. There's a good supply of balls in both goals because the goalkeepers are responsible for distributing the ball each time. And I've made it very generous. So I've made it a 4 defenders and a goalie. So a 5 versus 1 back here. And the idea of the game is the goalie rolls it into his players and their objective is to shoot at goal. So it's this distance shooting through defenders. Of course, as we get better at it, they can play it into target players to have it drop back. And if we start getting long shots, then we certainly want our strikers now not admiring the long shot, but following in and getting rebounds. So this is all about distance shooting, poaching in the penalty area. And then we can do things like send a white player out to press the ball if we want to, so we can make this 4v2 or 3v2 or whatever your numbers you've got. But it's a really pretty fundamental long distance shooting game. But if you start to get creative about how the long shots are created, using the target players maybe to bounce the ball in and off of, as I say up here in the little note box, 2 strikers hunt rebounds and deflections. So you're teaching poaching. Because what sometimes happens is these white players will just come and stand on the blue line because they're restricted to the half. So now I've got to drop the ball out and shoot around them. So do I shoot over the defenders, around the defenders? If I can't see the ball here, do I kick it out to this left-footed player and maybe he crosses it and my strikers get a finish? So it's a conditioned activity using 2 zones. Very straightforward, but it works. It has a great opportunity to give you plenty of reps. So that's my second finishing activity. This one is a little bit of an homage to Tim Carter, who used to be the director of coaching education for US Soccer. And if you look at it now, the top of the box is the halfway line. So what I've done is I've added these 2 light blue lines and I've used the top of the box as my halfway line. So the distance from this goalie to the halfway line is 18, and the same for the other goalie. And if you know your math of a soccer field, these 2 thin blue lines are 20 yards apart. So that playing space is 36 yards long and 20 yards wide. That is incredibly tight playing space. And it's done so with a great degree of intention, because this is high energy, high intensity finishing. Maybe a 3v3 in the middle, because I'm working on the principle, I've got 14 kids, I've got 2 goalies, and around the half that we're attacking, I've put a red player behind the goal, a red player behind the goal, and 1 on the right flank. Obviously, if I got a couple more kids, I would put 1 on the left flank. And the idea is that the goalkeeper and his or her 3 teammates are just trying to score, and the opponent's trying to dispossess them and score, all in a 20 by 36, incredibly tight space. If, however, I can't get the shot on goal, I can play to the outside players, which we call boppers. That's what I like to call them. And your colleagues from Livonia, Michigan, and Livonia Stevenson used to call them boppers too. So now I can play the ball to the bopper. He can't score because he's an outside player, but he plays it back into his teammate, who then shoots to the far corner. So what's nice about this is as that ball is being played, this player is thinking about getting into an open shooting position. The other nice thing about the 6 kids around the outside is if they're engaged and they're moving, they can catch errant shots and put the ball back into play. So it's almost like playing in a boarded hockey arena. If you've got a really high energy group of players, the ball is just flying around all the time. Supply of soccer balls in each goal. And then we have this notion of make it, take it. So as soon as that ball is played to the end target, dropped back and scored, I'm yelling, the coach is yelling, make it, take it. Hopefully my team is yelling, make it, take it, because it's our goalie that gets to restart it. So if you score, you get the ball back, which is kind of fun. You play a set of that for 3 minutes, maybe less. And then you just simply say, switch on the fly. You don't stop it. And these 3 kids will run in, these 3 kids will run out. And you could literally play that activity for the entire 75 minutes of a high school training session. I'm not suggesting you do, but that is probably about as favorite a game for a group of young players as you're going to find if you get it down and you get them enjoying it. And you just get every bizarre, eclectic finish that you want, as opposed to kids lining up at a stationary ball and shooting from 20 yards at a goalie. So I love that activity. And so I think that's 3. So I got a couple more, 3 more, and then I'll turn it back to Matt if there's questions. So please feel free to think about anything you want to object to or ask about. No question is a bad question, just a naive one. That's all good. And I certainly would love to chat about them and go back through the slides and discuss them. So the next one, okay, this one works very, very well. And I highly recommend this activity. So what I've got here is I've got a short field. You determine the length of the field. I'm using this graphic, which is a 7v7 field. I've got a good supply of balls at each goal. I've got my 2 goalies. And for the sake of argument here, I've got a 1v1 permanent in the box. And down at the other end, I've got the same thing. So now we're starting to talk about function, right? Function is your goalie. They're different. They throw it, they catch it, they kick it. They have gloves. Now I've got my high school starting center back against my high school starting striker. And up here, I've got my second best center back against my second best striker. You create those dynamics, 2v2, 1v1, whatever you want. And then what you have is on each flank, you've got players on deck. So the game is simply that this goalie, once he starts it, he plays it out to a white flank player who comes in, and 1 comes in from the other side. So in that case, I've got 1 at the top, 2. It's a 3v1 to goal. So it's very aggressive numbers. We should get a lot of goals. As soon as the ball goes in, the whites jog off, the 2 wide whites. The red goalie picks it up. He distributes it, so she distributes it down to their guys, and then they come in and play that 3v1 to goal. So it's incredibly fast paced back and forth. You just get all of these little, in this case, 3v1 scenarios. And of course, if you put a second red defender in, now the defenders have a challenge. Can one of them go and press the ball? Do they stay with the central player? So you can make this 3v2. You can make it, obviously you could make it 3v3 if you wanted to. If the red team wins it, they get to pass it out. If this red defender should win it, he just knocks the ball straight to his wide guys and you go the other way. This is not a 2-way game. You don't play through the middle third of the field right now. It always sets off of a ball served to a wide player, and then they attack from a numerical advantage. So there's a lot of utility here. I could also, as I make it more sophisticated, put a couple of midfielders in the center circle that perform a similar all-time role as the defenders and attackers. But again, every ball is always served out to the flank. So now when the flank player gets it, maybe he or she could drop it to a midfielder supporting them, and maybe that midfielder can join in. So you can add players into different parts of the field, but each repetition is cued by a service out to the free wide player. And again, you're looking now a little bit more sophisticated. So you're putting players in their functional roles. I'll give you one little coaching insight, and I think it comes out in the video. Every time you do this, even if you put in 2 or 3 defenders, at the end of the repetition, this player will always be on the left, this player will almost always be in the center, and this one will almost always be in the right. So if you see that after 3 or 4 repetitions, start talking to the players now about, could the striker check out and could the left midfielder run inside? Or could this player on the right pass it into the striker and then run inside as opposed to outside? So one of the things you do want to try to get these 3 in this instance doing is you want them to kind of washing machine, if you will, tumble. You want them to try to switch positions. You want mobility out of them. So they might not do it because there's not enough challenge. You might need to put more challenge in. They might not do it because they just don't have the imagination or they don't feel empowered. And that's where you as a coach have to come in and incentivize or encourage them to think about switching up and down. And then just a couple more. So you can see at different times I've used various conditions, zones of the field, channels, if you will. Most of what I've shown you in this session are what I would call horizontal channels. But in this instance, I've given you a vertical channel. So what I've done is the thin blue line runs from the top of the box to the top of the other box, and there's one on the other side. So now I've got this right-sided, or I've got this wing channel on this flank and the wing channel on this flank. And then I've obviously got a nice big chunk in the middle. So now I've got vertical zones, if you will. This activity works that whichever team is in possession, so the goalie at the bottom, his or her players can go into the wide space and they can go in there unmolested. So now when this goalie gets it, his team is incentivized to disperse and get wide, which is what you want your attacking team to do. The white team, the defending team, has to be in the middle channel as a condition of the game. So you've now got, when the ball goes to this goalkeeper, the whites have to step in to the center of the field, which is actually good because you want your team, when it's defending, to consolidate, compact in the center of the park. Obviously, if you give it out here and you allow this player to play unmolested, they walk miserably slowly down the field and cross the ball, and the whole session is awful. So what you would do is you would say, once the player outside has received it, he or she can be pressured. So now you get a little 1v1 out here. As soon as there's a 1v1, this player now has to beat them one-on-one, or maybe they play inside and a second player goes out. So you can have unlimited players on the outside, but you can press them. And if the ball's gone to this one and they play it to this one, now this guy, this white player, can come out and challenge. So what you've done is you've created, it's a game. It's a very, very, very realistic game, except you've incentivized employing the width and giving them a little bit of an opportunity for success in the wide space before the pressure comes. And so what you're going to get eventually is you're going to get 1v1 duels, you're going to get overlapping situations, you're going to get crosses for finishes, you're going to get this player here, weak side running, coming into the box late. It's a wonderful game using a modest zonal condition to get you going. You don't have throw-ins, you don't have goal kicks, everything starts with the goalkeeper's hands. One team is dispersing, one team is compacting. It's a great little training session that I'm very, very keen with. I do this one a lot. And it's not the case the whites can't go out there. They just can't go out there until XYZ. And then the very last slide for you tonight, and then I'll unshare and we can chat for a few minutes if you'd like to, is this one, which is 3 zones. Use the blue lines now for me, if you will. I've created a goalkeeper 1v1 in the top half, goalkeeper 1v1 in the bottom area, excuse me. And then I've just created in the midfield matchup. So I've gone for a 4v4 because maybe my teams play 4-4-2. But obviously you could make this 5 versus 3, 4 versus 3. You can mess around with the shapes if you like to play with a triangle or a diamond, or you like to play with full width. And all the condition is that probably the coach, you'd be standing on the halfway line. You'd have all the balls. You'd fire a ball into the middle. There'd be maybe a touch condition or some objective for the midfield. And once they've achieved that objective, they can play it into their target player. And then a player can join. So you can have one player join, multiple players join, but you want to have a numerical advantage in here because you want to get that finishing activity. How do we get into the final zone? You could say that maybe the player in possession, if he or she can dribble over, can play 2v1 with their partner. I like to make it play it into your target. And in this case, we've got movement off the ball. Obviously, if this player plays it, maybe he or she could continue the run in, but then everything happens in the sight line of the goalkeeper and the defender. So I think you'll appreciate that if we play it into the target, if we play it into the target and the movement comes from the weak side, it can be particularly devastating. So again, you can enter on the dribble or pass as the options. You can allow for recovery. Maybe a defender can drop in or a midfielder can drop in, but everything resets from the coach. So it always starts in the midfield in some capacity. And then again, if you like to play with one striker, this makes sense. But if you're a two-striker team, then maybe you have a 2v2 in the goal box because you want to get that passing combination. Again, high degree of function. So you're really now starting to put players in the positions they will play for you on Saturday against your opponent, in the same way that you put your goalies in. You put your center backs at this high school level. You're not having the players do a lot of generic activity. They're having position specific, technical, tactical specific, functional type training. So there are a few ideas, 12 different little activities. I got myself to right about a good time.
Ian, my question about all those finishing activities
Mm-hmm.
kind of goes with finishers.
Mm-hmm.
Born, or can we create them?
Excellent question. That's a great question. And it's, so I think mentality is a huge part of it, right? Some of those images at the beginning there, if you recognize some of them, like a Luis Suarez, probably not a guy that many of you would like to go for an extended, it's probably not a guy you'd like to have over for Thanksgiving dinner, but an amazingly talented individual technically and tactically, but also got a chip on his shoulder, just some magic sauce. There is no such thing as a bad goal. I would hope you would all agree with that. So if it hits me on the backside, or I bicycle kick it, or I flick it. So I think you have to be a bit of a maverick sometimes to be that striker. That said, I think you can increase their success rates by giving them multiple repetitions, by sometimes giving them a little bit more freedom than you give your center backs, because you need your center backs to show up for 80 minutes or 90 minutes and be very consistent. But your strikers, you can take a little bit of a risk with. So I believe that the best strikers in the world, Matt, are born, but I still believe they can be polished, and I believe they need to be nurtured as well. I'll give you a very quick example that's kind of interesting, because we were talking about the Lupinex and Vardar before. I had a Wisconsin ODP team a number of years ago. We were in the semifinal of the tournament against Kentucky. I brought on a young man. I brought him on. He scored a hat trick. We won 3-1. That evening, I was summoned to the selectors room, and I felt very small. And they're like, "What the hell are you doing keeping that kid on the bench? Is there a problem with this kid that would mean we can't select him? He's obviously a good player, but you didn't play him." And I explained that the young man, he was actually redheaded too, which is interesting. He was much more responsive if I didn't start him. He was kind of a chip on his shoulder, and he came in with great energy for 50 minutes than if I started him and he just coasted through the game. So I do think the management of your strikers is important. But I would say I could, if you gave me just a boy or a girl off the street, I can probably make him a pretty good center back, pretty good fullback, pretty good midfielder, guaranteed. Could I make them a top class striker? Less guarantee, right? I really believe that.
A couple other questions coming in. Just kind of a general question. What is the most common mistake you see new coaches making?
Yeah. The worst thing you can do to the players is stop them too much and disrupt their enjoyment of the game, and commentate and talk too much. So in my opinion, the first thing you have to be an effective coach, and most of you are school teachers, I'm assuming, or many of you are, you have to facilitate a good classroom, right? So if you don't have a whiteboard or a blackboard or computer monitors or good desks or good lighting, like I didn't have, you can't be effective. So the first thing, you've got to facilitate a good environment. You've got to set up the activities. You've got to have flow. You've got to know your space. You've got to know how many players you've got and how they divide into certain numbers. I would hope that most of us can get into that space. Where we actually fail to facilitate a good environment is because we're so anxious to spew knowledge and give the impression that we're the teacher. And I do believe that more often than not, the game is the teacher, and we as the coaches are just manipulating opportunities. So the most common mistake a young coach has is not doing enough. It's doing too much, and often giving either bad advice or intrusive advice. So less is best sometimes, and then being very clear, concise, and relevant with information, and then getting the hell out of the way. That's my opinion about new coaches.
Okay.
I am much less. The sessions that your colleagues will see on the video are clinic sessions, so I have to talk all the time. But if you came to watch me with my college team or my ODP team, I coach a lot less, but much more effectively now than I did when I was a young coach.
Okay. Going back to the rondos you showed, one of our coaches wanted to know how much coaching you do during these, because his players love basic rondos as sort of downtime where they can be creative and joke around. So how do you balance a little bit of coaching versus having fun with those activities?
Thank you for the question, Brian. It's a great one. And the answer is intentionality on your part. And this would actually lead into the question before as well, which is the more experienced coach, the more effective coach is intentional with everything they do, or to the best of their ability. And the best session I ever do will hopefully be the last one before they put me 6 feet under. And it will be where every element of the session was done with intention, so that if somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Why are you doing that?" I would have an answer. So for example, to Brian's question, if I've got a group of young players, they show up, they're messing about with a rondo, they're talking a little bit of smack, but they're having fun, they're connecting, and it's the 5 minutes before I want to start the training session. Great. I might even go and play in with them and have a laugh and a giggle and maybe pick on one of the kids who's a superstar and make sure he stays in the middle the whole time. So it's a humbling experience for him. So I think it has team bonding. I think it has a little bit of physical and mental activation, cognitive activation. So I would use it like that, but it would be intentional. I would know that if I'm there and my boys are doing something, I almost exclusively coach men or young men, and it looks like grab ass, excuse my language, but I want it to be like that, or I have a reason for it, no problem at all. By the same token, I could say, right, everybody around the center circle, I want 4 in the middle, I want you to high press, and the rest of you on the outside, it's 2 touch, 1 touch, and I need you to split them every time. I need you to find the split pass. And then I would get in and maybe help them and show them and suggest it. So I could take it from the appearance of gravitas at 0 to the appearance of gravitas at 100, but I'm doing it because it fits into the cycle of what I'm doing. So again, this would be an objective for you. If you felt like the AD comes out or some angry parent comes out and says to you, "What the hell are you doing?" And you can say, "Well, we're doing this today because we had a game on Saturday. We're very tired. Half the guys didn't get into the game on Saturday, so they're doing this activity because they need to get more minutes on their legs. But this group is doing a little bit of a lesser activity. Or this activity where I'm not coaching, is actually an opportunity for them to deal with some communication and team building and collaboration, or deal with adversity." If you can explain, if you can account for what you're doing intelligently, then I think you've done very, very well. So if they're being creative and joking around, Brian, and that's what you want them to be doing, and you empower them to do it, you're managing the session. You're coaching just as much and actually more effectively than the person that's standing in the middle just talking for 75 minutes. Like me.
Got to unmute myself. Random question about those finishing exercises and even the rondos, as fun as they can be, your thoughts on the coach jumping into the session versus being outside and coaching the session?
Oh, well, certainly at the high school level, don't play in with them. So I would never suggest you would play in with them. I think there were times when I was a younger assistant, maybe we did. And, you know, maybe you've got a young assistant and he or she makes up the numbers. But as the head coach, I would do pretty much everything I could to avoid participating in the session. Where the coach stands, I think, is a really interesting and critical part of coaching methodology. Very often we stand at the halfway line. So we give a lot of intimate attention to the wide players right in front of us, and we never address the wide guys on the other side unless we think to change the teams around. And we might not see what we need to see. Maybe, I mean, if you think about it, I like to think if you stood halfway up a sideline as opposed to the halfway, so sort of 3/4 of the way, whatever you're looking at, you get a completely different and better perspective in the training environment. So I typically never stand just on the halfway line, on the side. I will absolutely sometimes stand in the field of play because I want to whisper in the ear to a certain player. And occasionally I'll get in the way and you just hop out the way. So it isn't bad. It isn't forbidden to walk into the field, but you do lose, you've got your back turned to parts of the action. So generally, my position is at an angle to the field, looking across. And then I've got a pretty good voice. If the players have faith in you and you've got a good voice, you can, and sometimes you use a whistle, but you just step in, stop it, get them where you want them, and off you go. The other part of it too, and it's interesting because the question about young coaches, all of you can probably relate to this at different times in your career when you were coaching sessions, not games, but sessions. You're wandering everywhere. You're walking over here and you're walking over there, and you don't really know why you're doing it. You're just having a nervous sort of twitch. I believe this strongly, that players love to know where the coach is, especially if they're anticipating a coaching intervention. It's a drag for the players to suddenly look around and say, well, he was standing there a second ago and now he's over there. So I tend to be quite fixed in my training sessions. And I tend to be more on the outside of them, trying to view the 22 as opposed to be in the middle, trying to get a feel of the pace and some of those things.
Ian, any final words for us before we get out of here?
Yeah, I'll leave you with this. I coached my very first, other than camps, coaching opportunity when I came to this country was coaching high school in Wisconsin. I did it for a couple of years and then I got the job with Wisconsin. Unfortunately, many people in soccer in this country have taken it upon themselves to rubbish high school soccer at different times. Youth club, college, certainly US soccer. I don't think there's anywhere in the world as where the academic component is tied so strongly to the soccer as there is in high school soccer, because I know your kids have to maintain academic performance. There's probably that your high school players will probably never play in a crowd. Almost all of them will probably never play in a crowd as big again as a decent Friday night game between two rival high schools. High school soccer is incredibly important in this country. And even in the areas where somebody brilliantly, like US soccer, says kids can't play high school soccer, or some league says they can't, the good thing is you'll always have enough players. You might lose some of your best ones because of somebody else making a prohibition on them, but you'll always have enough kids. And at the end of the day, it's not about the kids that you don't have there, right? It's about the ones that do show up. So I commend you all for being high school coaches, and especially if you're high school teachers. And long may Michigan continue to be, along with Illinois, probably the dominant soccer player producing state in the Midwest. So it's a pleasure to be invited. It's great for you guys to give up your time. And it's just nice to be around football people. So thank you very much.